What if everything you think you know about yourself is a lie? What if the person staring back at you in the mirror is nothing more than a carefully constructed mask, hiding your true nature from the world and even from yourself? I'm known as one of the most revolutionary minds in psychology, and I discovered something that would shake the foundations of human understanding. I found that we are all living in a matrix of our own making, trapped in layers of false identity that keep us from ever experiencing who we really are. But I didn't just identify the problem, I provided the keys to escape. The methods I developed over decades of research reveal how to break free from the psychological prison that most people never even realize they're in. This isn't just theory, this is a roadmap to liberation that I spent my life mapping. If you're ready to discover the truth about your own mind and learn how to escape the false reality that's been controlling your life, stay with me. What you're about to learn will change everything you believe about consciousness, identity, and what it means to be truly awake. I made a discovery that would terrify most people if they truly understood its implications. Through years of analyzing thousands of patients' dreams and the deepest layers of human consciousness, I realized that what most people call their self is actually an elaborate performance. I called this performance the persona, and it represents one of the most sophisticated traps ever devised by the human mind. The persona is not just the mask you wear in social situations, it's far more insidious than that. It's the complete identity system that you've been building since childhood, layer by layer, until it becomes so convincing that you forget it's not real. Every role you play, every expectation you meet, every way you've learned to be acceptable to others has contributed to this false self. The terrifying truth is that most people live their entire lives without ever meeting who they actually are beneath this construction. I discovered that this persona develops as a survival mechanism. From the moment you're born, you begin to learn what behaviors get you love, attention, and acceptance. You start to suppress the parts of yourself that others don't like and amplify the parts that bring rewards. Slowly, systematically, you build a personality that isn't authentic but functional. It gets you through life, helps you fit in, and keeps you safe from rejection. But here's where it becomes a prison. Over time, you become so identified with this constructed self that you lose access to your authentic nature. You start to believe that the mask is who you are. Every decision you make, every goal you pursue, every relationship you form is based on maintaining this false identity. You become trapped in a performance that never ends, exhausted from constantly trying to be someone you're not. The persona operates like a sophisticated algorithm, constantly calculating what response will get the best result in any given situation. It's not conscious manipulation. It's become so automatic that you don't even realize you're doing it. You've internalized the patterns so deeply that they feel natural. But I realized that this automatic functioning is exactly what keeps people unconscious. They're responding to life through a programmed interface rather than from their authentic core. Most people never question this system because it seems to work. They get jobs, form relationships, and navigate society successfully. But I observed something crucial. Beneath this functional exterior, there's often a deep sense of emptiness, anxiety, and disconnection. People feel like something is missing, like they're living someone else's life, but they can't identify what's wrong. This is the voice of the authentic self, trapped beneath layers of conditioning, trying to break through. The persona doesn't just hide your true nature from others, it hides it from yourself. You become so skilled at being what others expect that you lose touch with what you actually want, feel, and believe. Your dreams become others' dreams. Your values become borrowed values. Your very thoughts start to feel foreign because they've been shaped by external pressures rather than internal truth. I called this the first layer of the matrix, but I discovered it goes much deeper. The persona is just the surface level of a much more complex system of psychological imprisonment. Beneath the social mask lie even more powerful forces that shape consciousness without your awareness. The journey to freedom requires not just recognizing the persona, but understanding the entire architecture of psychological control that operates within the human mind. This is why so many people feel stuck in their lives even when everything looks successful from the outside. They're trying to find fulfillment through a false identity that can never be satisfied because it's not real. No matter how much they achieve, how much approval they get, or how perfectly they play their role, there's always an underlying sense that something essential is missing, that something something is their authentic self, buried beneath years of conditioning and performance. The first step to escape is recognizing that what you think of as you might not be you at all. While most people are busy perfecting their persona, I discovered something even more disturbing lurking in the depths of consciousness. I called it the shadow, and it represents everything you've been taught to reject, deny, and hide about yourself. But here's the shocking truth. The shadow isn't just a collection of negative traits. It's also the repository of your authentic power, creativity, and vital energy. By rejecting it, you've unknowingly imprisoned the very parts of yourself that could set you free. The shadow forms through a process I called splitting. From early childhood, you learn that certain aspects of your natural self are unacceptable. Maybe your anger was met with punishment, your sadness with dismissal, your creativity with ridicule, or your independence with abandonment. To survive, you learn to push these parts of yourself into the unconscious, creating what I described as an internal split between the acceptable self and the unacceptable self. But energy cannot be destroyed, only redirected. All those rejected aspects don't disappear. They go underground, forming a parallel personality system that operates outside of your conscious awareness. This shadow self doesn't just contain your negative impulses. It holds your authentic emotions, your unexpressed creativity, your natural instincts, and your genuine responses to life. In trying to be good, acceptable, and civilized, you've exiled the very essence of who you are. The shadow operates like a hidden puppet master, influencing your behavior in ways you don't recognize. When you have sudden outbursts of anger that seem to come from nowhere, when you're inexplicably attracted to people who are bad for you, when you find yourself doing things that contradict your conscious values. This is the shadow asserting itself. It's not evil, it's simply the parts of you that have been denied expression seeking a way out. I realized that this internal split creates a form of psychological warfare. The conscious mind is constantly working to suppress and control the shadow, while the shadow is constantly seeking expression. This internal conflict drains enormous amounts of energy and creates persistent anxiety, depression, and feelings of being out of control. Most people live in a constant state of low-level internal tension because they're literally at war with themselves. The most insidious aspect of the shadow is projection. Because you can't acknowledge these rejected aspects in yourself, you unconsciously project them onto others. The traits you most despise in other people are often the very qualities you've rejected in yourself. The person who annoys you most intensely is likely reflecting back an aspect of your own shadow. This keeps you trapped in external conflicts that are actually internal battles in disguise. Political hatred, relationship drama, social prejudice, much of human conflict stems from shadow projection. People are fighting external enemies that are actually internal aspects they refuse to acknowledge. This is how the psychological matrix keeps humanity divided and distracted. Instead of integrating their own internal contradictions, people externalize the conflict, ensuring they never achieve the wholeness that would set them free. But I discovered something revolutionary. The shadow isn't your enemy, it's your ally in disguise. Within the shadow lies not just your rejected negativity, but also your unlived potential. The qualities you've suppressed often contain the keys to your greatest gifts. The anger you've denied might contain your passion for justice. The sadness you've rejected might hold your capacity for deep compassion. The selfishness you've disowned might actually be healthy self-respect. The shadow also holds what I called inferior functions, aspects of your personality that were underdeveloped because they didn't fit your survival strategy. If you learned to be logical and rational, your emotional and intuitive sides went into the shadow. If you developed your helpful, people-pleasing nature, your assertive, boundary-setting capacity got buried. These aren't character flaws. They're missing pieces of your complete self. Most therapeutic approaches try to manage or eliminate problematic behaviors, but I realized this approach keeps people trapped in the split. Instead of trying to get rid of the shadow, I developed methods for integrating it, bringing these rejected aspects back into conscious awareness where they could be transformed rather than suppressed. This process, which I called individuation, represents the path to psychological wholeness. The journey to escape the matrix requires facing your shadow, not to judge it, fight it, or eliminate it, but to reclaim the energy and authenticity that's been locked away in the unconscious. This isn't about becoming your worst impulses, it's about becoming whole. When you stop rejecting parts of yourself, you stop projecting them onto the world. When you integrate your internal contradictions, you become free from the external conflicts that have been controlling your life. This is the second key to escaping my matrix, recognizing that your greatest enemy is actually your missing ally. My most revolutionary discovery went far beyond individual psychology. I found that beneath personal consciousness lies something even more controlling, the collective unconscious. This isn't just a theoretical concept, it's a hidden operating system that shapes human behavior on a massive scale, creating patterns of thought, emotion, and action that feel personal, but are actually programmed responses shared across entire cultures and even species. The collective unconscious operates through what I called archetypes, universal patterns of behavior and thinking that exist independently of individual experience. These archetypes function like psychological software, running programs in your mind that you didn't install and don't consciously control. They influence everything from who you're attracted to, what you fear, what you value, and how you interpret reality itself. Think about how certain stories, symbols, and themes appear across all cultures throughout history. The hero's journey, the wise old man, the mother figure, the trickster, the lover, the warrior. These patterns emerge spontaneously in myths, dreams, and stories everywhere, regardless of contact between cultures. This isn't coincidence. These are archetypal programs operating in the human psyche, shaping consciousness according to ancient templates. But here's where it becomes a form of control. Most people are unconsciously living out archetypal patterns without realizing it. They think they're making individual choices, but they're actually following scripts that have been running for thousands of years. The person who dedicates their life to helping others might be unconsciously possessed by the caregiver archetype. The individual who becomes obsessed with success could be driven by the ruler archetype. Someone who rebels against authority might be channeling the rebel archetype. These aren't inherently negative patterns, but when they operate unconsciously, they become prisons. You're not living your authentic life. You're acting out an ancient program. Your personality, your relationships, your career choices, even your spiritual path might be determined by archetypal influences that you've never consciously examined. I discovered that the collective unconscious also contains what I called cultural complexes, shared psychological patterns that grip entire societies. These complexes create mass movements, social hysteria, and collective obsessions that sweep through populations like psychological epidemics. People believe they're thinking independently, but they're actually infected by collective thought patterns that spread through the unconscious. Political movements, social trends, mass hysteria, even fashion and entertainment preferences often reflect these cultural complexes at work. When millions of people suddenly become obsessed with the same ideas, behaviors, or fears, it's usually because a cultural complex has been activated in the collective unconscious. Individual minds become synchronized around shared archetypal themes, creating the illusion of independent thought while actually following collective programming. The most disturbing aspect of this system is how it's used for control. Throughout history, those who understand archetypal psychology have used it to manipulate masses of people. Political propaganda, advertising, religious movements, and social engineering all work by activating specific archetypes in the collective unconscious. When you understand which archetypal buttons to push, you can predictably influence how large groups of people will think, feel, and behave. Modern media and technology have made this archetypal manipulation more sophisticated than ever. Movies, television, social media, and advertising are carefully designed to trigger specific archetypal responses. The stories you're told, the images you see, the fears that are promoted, and the desires that are cultivated are all calculated to activate particular patterns in your unconscious mind. You think you're being entertained or informed, but you're actually being programmed. The collective unconscious also operates through what I called participation mystique, the unconscious identification with group consciousness. When you're caught in participation mystique, you lose your individual perspective and become merged with collective thinking. You start to believe that the group's thoughts are your thoughts, the group's emotions are your emotions, and the group's values are your values. This creates a psychological hive mind where individual consciousness is subsumed into collective patterns. But I also discovered the key to freedom from collective programming, individuation. This is the process of differentiating yourself from archetypal and collective influences, not by rejecting them, but by becoming conscious of how they operate within you. When you can recognize an archetypal pattern or collective complex as it's influencing you, you regain the power of choice. You can choose to engage with the pattern consciously rather than being unconsciously possessed by it. Individuation doesn't mean isolation from collective life. It means participating in collective existence while maintaining your individual consciousness. You can appreciate archetypal wisdom without being possessed by archetypal compulsions. You can engage with cultural movements without losing yourself in cultural complexes. This is the third key to escaping my matrix. Recognizing that many of your thoughts, emotions, and behaviors aren't personally generated but are archetypal and collective patterns running through your psyche. Only by becoming conscious of these deeper influences can you begin to live from your authentic individual nature rather than from unconscious collective programming. While most people dismiss dreams as random brain activity, I discovered they represent something far more significant: direct communication from the unconscious mind, containing precise information about how to escape the psychological prison most people live in. Dreams aren't just meaningless noise, they're sophisticated guidance systems, providing navigation instructions for the journey from false identity to authentic selfhood. I realized that dreams operate according to their own logic, one that's radically different from waking consciousness. While the conscious mind thinks in linear, rational terms, the unconscious communicates through symbols, metaphors, and emotional resonances. Dreams speak the language of the psyche itself, revealing truths that can't be accessed through ordinary thinking. But most people never learn to decode these messages, missing critical information about their own psychological development. The unconscious uses dreams to compensate for the imbalances created by conscious attitudes. If your waking life is too one-sided, too controlled, or too removed from your authentic nature, dreams will present images and experiences that restore psychological equilibrium. Someone who's overly rational might dream of wild emotional scenarios. A person who's too passive might dream of taking aggressive action. Dreams don't just reflect your current state, they show you what you need to become whole. But dreams also reveal the deeper structure of the psychological matrix that keeps you trapped. They show you how your persona operates, what aspects of your shadow you're avoiding, and which archetypal patterns are controlling your behavior. Through dream analysis, you can see the hidden mechanisms of your own psychological imprisonment and receive specific guidance about how to break free. I discovered that dreams often contain what I call prospective elements, images and scenarios that point toward future psychological development. These aren't predictions of external events, but previews of internal transformations that are trying to emerge. Dreams show you the person you're capable of becoming if you're willing to do the psychological work required for transformation. Recurring dreams and nightmare patterns are particularly significant because they indicate psychological complexes that are demanding attention. These aren't random mental disturbances, they're urgent communications from aspects of your psyche that have been neglected or suppressed. The more intense and persistent the dream, the more critical the message it contains. Your unconscious will continue sending the same dream until you understand and integrate what it's trying to communicate. I also found that dreams contain both personal and collective elements. While some dream images relate to your individual history and psychological development, others connect you to universal archetypal patterns. Learning to distinguish between personal and collective dream content helps you understand both your individual psychological needs and your connection to the broader patterns of human consciousness. The process of working with dreams isn't about finding fixed interpretations or universal symbol meanings. Dreams are highly personal communications that must be understood within the context of your own psychological situation. The same symbol can mean completely different things for different people, or even different things for the same person at different times. The key is learning to feel into the emotional resonance of dream images and understanding how they relate to your current psychological challenges. Active imagination, a technique I developed, allows you to continue dream conversations while awake. By re-entering dream scenarios and dialoguing with dream figures, you can receive additional guidance and work through psychological conflicts in a direct experiential way. This isn't fantasy or make-believe. It's a method for accessing unconscious wisdom and integrating psychological splits. Dreams also provide early warning systems for psychological problems. Often symptoms of depression, anxiety, or psychological breakdown appear in dreams long before they manifest in waking life. By paying attention to dream messages, you can address psychological imbalances before they become serious problems. Dreams offer preventive psychological medicine, but only if you learn to recognize and respond to their guidance. Perhaps most importantly, dreams reveal the artificial nature of the boundaries that normally limit consciousness. In dreams, you can be multiple people simultaneously, exist in impossible spaces, and experience realities that transcend the normal rules of physics and logic. These experiences aren't hallucinations, they're glimpses of consciousness operating beyond the constraints of ordinary reality. Dreams show you that the limitations of waking consciousness are not absolute, but are imposed by specific psychological structures that can be transcended. The ultimate purpose of dream work in my system is to establish conscious communication with the unconscious mind. Instead of living in the split between conscious and unconscious, waking and sleeping, you can develop an integrated awareness that has access to both rational thinking and intuitive wisdom. This integrated consciousness is the key to escaping the psychological matrix because it allows you to see through the illusions that normally govern human experience. Dreams are not distractions from waking life. They're invitations to awaken to a larger reality that encompasses both conscious and unconscious dimensions of existence. I discovered that there's a natural process built into human consciousness that leads to liberation from all psychological prisons. I called it individuation, and it represents the most sophisticated escape route ever mapped from the matrix of false identity, collective programming, and unconscious compulsion. But individuation isn't automatic. It requires conscious participation, tremendous courage, and a willingness to sacrifice everything you think you are for everything you could become. Individuation is the process by which you become who you actually are, rather than who you've been conditioned to be. It's not about self-improvement or personal development in the conventional sense. It's about psychological transformation so fundamental that you emerge as essentially a different person, one who operates from authenticity rather than programming. The first stage of individuation requires recognizing and dissolving the persona, the false identity you've constructed to navigate social life. This isn't about abandoning all social functioning, but about distinguishing between necessary social skills and compulsive people-pleasing. You learn to engage with others authentically rather than through a carefully managed performance. This stage often involves a period of social discomfort as you stop being who others expect you to be and start being who you actually are. The second stage involves confronting and integrating the shadow, reclaiming all the aspects of yourself that you've rejected or denied. This is often the most difficult phase because it requires facing parts of yourself that you've spent years avoiding. But I discovered that the shadow contains not just negative qualities, but also undeveloped potentials, creative energies, and authentic emotional responses that have been suppressed by social conditioning. Shadow integration doesn't mean acting out every impulse or becoming your worst qualities. It means acknowledging these aspects of yourself so that you can choose how to express them consciously rather than having them control you unconsciously. When you stop rejecting parts of yourself, you stop projecting them onto others, which transforms all your relationships and eliminates most interpersonal conflicts. The third stage involves differentiating yourself from collective and archetypal influences. You learn to recognize when you're thinking your own thoughts versus when you're channeling collective opinions, cultural programming, or archetypal patterns. This doesn't mean isolation from collective life, but conscious participation rather than unconscious possession. You can engage with collective movements and archetypal energies without losing your individual perspective. Throughout the individuation process, dreams provide crucial guidance, showing you which psychological work is most urgent and revealing the next steps in your development. I found that people going through individuation often experience remarkably similar dream patterns, suggesting that consciousness itself has a natural blueprint for psychological freedom. The process also involves what I called holding the tension of opposites. Instead of splitting your experience into good and bad, acceptable and unacceptable, you learn to contain contradictory aspects of yourself without forcing resolution. This creates a kind of psychological flexibility that allows you to respond to life situations from wholeness rather than from fragmented, one-sided positions. One of the most challenging aspects of individuation is the loneliness it can create. As you become more authentic, you may find that many relationships were based on mutual persona interactions rather than genuine connection. Some people in your life may resist your transformation because it challenges their own psychological defenses. This temporary isolation is a necessary phase that leads to more authentic relationships with others who are also committed to psychological growth. I also discovered that individuation often involves what I called the transcendent function, the emergence of a new attitude or perspective that transcends previous psychological limitations. This isn't achieved through mental effort, but through allowing new possibilities to emerge from the creative tension between conscious and unconscious elements. It's a form of psychological creativity that generates genuinely new solutions to old problems. The ultimate goal of individuation isn't happiness, success, or even peace, though these may emerge as byproducts. The goal is psychological wholeness, becoming a complete human being who can access the full spectrum of human capacities. This includes not just your personal potential, but your connection to the archetypal dimensions of existence and the collective evolutionary process of consciousness itself. I realized that individuation is not just a personal process, but a collective necessity. As more individuals break free from psychological programming and develop authentic consciousness, they contribute to the evolution of human awareness itself. Individual transformation becomes a form of service to the larger development of consciousness on the planet. The individuation process never truly ends because consciousness continues to evolve throughout life. But once you've established the basic pattern of psychological authenticity, you develop what I call psychological resilience, the ability to face life's challenges without retreating into false identities or unconscious reactions. This is the master key to escaping my matrix, the systematic development of authentic consciousness through the integration of all aspects of your psychological nature. It's not an easy path, but it's the only path that leads to genuine freedom from the illusions that imprison most human consciousness. The matrix that I discovered isn't a science fiction concept. It's the psychological reality that most people live in every day. You're trapped not by external forces, but by internal structures that operate below the level of conscious awareness. The persona keeps you performing instead of being authentic. The shadow keeps you divided against yourself. The collective unconscious keeps you following programs instead of making conscious choices. But I also provided the complete blueprint for escape. Liberation isn't about changing your external circumstances. It's about transforming your relationship with consciousness itself. When you stop identifying with false personalities, when you reclaim your rejected aspects, when you differentiate yourself from collective programming, you become free to live from your authentic nature for the first time. The individuation process isn't just personal development, it's consciousness evolution. Every person who breaks free from psychological programming contributes to the liberation of human consciousness itself. Your individual awakening becomes part of a larger transformation that's occurring across the planet. The choice is yours. You can continue living in the comfortable prison of unconscious patterns, or you can begin the journey towards psychological freedom. The path isn't easy, but the alternative is spending your entire life as a prisoner of illusions you never questioned. If this message resonated with your deeper knowing, if you're ready to begin the work of genuine psychological transformation, then you've already taken the first step. The matrix is real, but so is your power to escape it. The question isn't whether liberation is possible. I proved that it is. The question is whether you're ready to sacrifice who you think you are for who you actually could become. Your authentic self is waiting. Are you ready to meet it?